People who understand Chinese Japanese, what's the dumbest thing you've seen tattooed on someone? Took Mandarin in high school. My teacher told us about a woman who had a tattoo of the word air, probably thinking it meant free as in free spirited, but it actually means free as in no cost. Double quote. While stationed in Japan, a friend got a tattoo by some random guy outside of base. He wanted some Shinto quote for a prosperous life, but instead got the kanji reading something like fat fish eat long. The Japanese workers just called him fat fish for the next 3 years. It caught on live fire, even random people from other commands knew his nickname. Guy had no A now on his arm. Said it meant lover of Asian beauty when in fact it means foreign pervert. I met a girl when I was backpacking in China who knowingly had the characters for prostitute tattooed on her hip. She thought it was funny. And the only people who saw it would be ones she chose to show it to. The Chinese guy who was drinking with us in the hostel was horrified and suggested that she get another tattoo underneath which said only joking. The 4 elements tattoo with dirt. Hot, blow, wet was pretty funny. I speak Mandarin, and it works both ways. Here's one in reverse. On the beach in Taiwan I saw a huge, and I mean huge, ripped Taiwanese guy walking on the beach in Hualien with his girlfriend. On his back in black Gothic letters, flanked by swords, was the phrase, "Slut dude." Told him it was an interesting choice and tattoo store behind it. Turned out he thought he was getting a tattoo that said swordsman. When he found out what it actually said, well, wouldn't want to be that artist. Colleague of mine wanted his name, Nick, tattooed on his arm in Chinese characters. Spoiler. Ht don't work that way. To the credit of the artist, the stuff on his arm is pronounced Ng. It translates to none. Not my story, but a friend of mine. She could read kanji and was in class one day noticing this girl's tattoo for the first time. Confused, she inquired about it. "What does your tattoo say?" Double quote. "Hi princess." Turns out it actually said pig princess. Dude was so proud of his grandson that he had a tattoo that said "I love my grandson." Except I'm guessing everyone just googled "I love my grandson" because it came out reading "I love fat boys." Double quote. Whoops. I don't know if this was stupid or brilliant, but someone had ear cutie which is respectfully asking if they had soup dumplings. I thought it was really stupid until someone said that they must really like soup dumplings. Seen a few over the years, but one that I remember most was when I first started learning Mandarin. The guy had a tattoo on the back of his leg that proudly said "Oya," which means beef. Saw a pretty tatted up guy one day with some Chinese markings on his forearm. Asked him what they meant and he said just a bunch of random Chinese letters. To which I inquired, "Which ones?" And he corrected me, saying no. It said just a bunch of random Chinese letters. Thought it was pretty slick. Edit. Obligatory. This is my first ever silver. Thank you, kind stranger. As a side note, after I talked to this dude I got the idea to get a tattoo in Japanese that says "This is not Chinese." I think his was better. But both are funny in their own way. I, 27F, don't understand Chinese Japanese, have the characters for strawberry on my shoulder. Was at a gym changing and gal one who could read the language says, "Oh, strawberry, I love your tattoo." I explained why I had gotten the tattoo, long story involving strawberries, and gal 2 overheard our conversation. Gal 2 says I have a tattoo that means wisdom and shows us. Gal 1 says, "That says turtle." Edit. Here is the story behind the tattoo. My grandmother passed away of bone and lung cancer in 2010. I bought frozen strawberries a few weeks later to make smoothies in the morning. And the smell of those frozen strawberries transported me back to my childhood when I would eat frozen strawberries from her freezer. She used to pick so many and make jam etc, but I would pick strawberries to snack on instead of ice cream. After she had passed, I decided to get a tattoo and was thinking of a strawberry with ice crystals around it or something. I went for American Chinese food with friends and was telling them about my tattoo idea. When it came time to break out cookies and read our fortunes, mine read to remember is to understand, which I thought was cool. Had been remembering and thinking of my grandmother over the last month or so since she had passed. When I turned over the fortune, the Chinese word was strawberry. I've never seen 6 people turn white so quickly. I decided to get the Chinese symbols for strawberry that day. And I still have the fortune in a special box at home. Edit 2. Holy silver Batman. My first silver multiplied into 3. Golly gee willikers. Thank you. Once when I was in university, working at a shop, a very fat lady came in with the kanji for large tattooed on her shoulder blade. I politely complimented her tattoo and asked what it meant. She said it meant sassy. I have the characters for shrimp dumpling, Hago, tattooed on me. I knowingly did this because I'm half Chinese and F King love shrimp dumplings. I had a Chinese girl ask me if I knew what it meant and I laughed and said of course. I love dumplings. My Chinese mother was not impressed but then laughed and said it was very me. The second mistake I see apart from bad translation is that they use computer font for tattoos instead of calligraphic styles. Basically, it's the equivalent of getting an English tattoo in Times New Roman. Even if the character is correct, it looks like reading a bland text document. If you really insist on getting Japanese Chinese tattoos, make sure the artist is also familiar with the language and calligraphic styles along with getting the translation correct. Also, translations do not exactly work one-on-one. A phrase that sounds cool in English might sound extremely silly or childish if directly translated. Researching Japanese Chinese phrases is a better method and avoids the bad translation issue. Finally, it helps understanding some cultural context surrounding tattoos. In Japan, tattoos are almost entirely associated with the Yakuza. So don't be surprised if your tattoos aren't a hit with Japanese people even if you had everything correct. I saw someone with the characters for Big and Father and figured it was like an approximation of Big Daddy. The guy got really agitated with me and told me it was Chinese for eternal wealth. Okay. Charcoal grill instead of 7 rings. It always cracks me up to see people with single characters tattooed on themselves. Especially characters for the natural elements. I imagine the same tattoo except it says dirt in plain English. And it makes me laugh. Not Chinese Japanese, but I knew a guy who had a Ganesh tattoo and told me very robustly that his was the god of war. I attempted to let him down gently. Not a tattoo, but replay container stitched on a hat in Japanese. I knew a guy who thought he had warrior tattooed on his arm, but another friend informed me actually read drunk asshole. He was an asshole. And often drunk. So I chose to believe this. Not tattooed on someone, but I once saw a car with AORU written on it. It reads yakisoba, which is a Japanese noodle dish. I noticed some random white guy with some interesting tattoos. I think it was in an amusement park, and then got a little excited to see Korean tattoos, which you rarely ever see. They were written vertically on each of his calves. One said left leg. The other said right leg. Dumb and pretty cool. A friend of mine did a tattoo. He thought it was faith, but in reality was soup. Japanese. Meat Tuesday. If you're reading this, your eyes are slanted. They were correct. Sister has an apprenticeship at a tattoo parlor. She sent me a pic of a customer's tattoo asking what it said. The customer had said that it meant inner power. The word was pronounced hamburger. In English this means hamburger. My sister chose not to tell her, as it would definitely ruin her day. And I choose to believe she saw some inspirational Facebook post meant to trick people into believing things about a culture they only pretend to care about. And I applaud whoever made it. My friends and I went to Japan. My buddy is a huge fan of the culture but doesn't understand the language, so we went and he has a bunch of tattoos of all the places he has been with the sentence I visited, and so he wanted to get one in Japanese. Note the Japanese can be brutal. He ended up getting don't speak the language. Don't visit the country. He's trying to get it covered up. Edit. I feel I should mention it wasn't a full-on shop. It was a guy who did tattooing on the side. Shady guy but super polite. I guess he thought we would never find out, but a Japanese friend of ours explains what he just permanently got. And told him next time give the artist the characters to use instead of saying I wanted to say. I visited Japan. We all play games together. No one is from one place. I am from Canada. 3 of us from the US. 1 from Britain. And 2 from Japan. Getting game nights together is a nightmare. Not the circumstances in THR question, but still similar. My mom used to work as an ophthalmic tech. The doctors gave the techs free rein when it came to scrubs, so my mom and her friends always had really fun scrubs and clogs. One set had some Chinese characters all over them. After work one day, her and her work friends all got dinner, and while they were waiting to be seated, a Chinese family came in and was behind them. The father got a kick out of the scrubs because they were just a random mix of words. My mom said he was pointing them out to her like this one means shoes and so on. Her friends were dying laughing, and while my mom thought it was super funny too, she stopped wearing those scrubs. I don't speak Japanese nor Chinese. But I once had an art academy colleague who had 2 kanjis she had tattooed on each shoulder. And she believed they meant eternal happiness or something. Because she saw them in a book at a flea market. I copied the kanjis on a piece of paper and translated them on Google. They roughly translated to foot fungus. The kanjis are these. Not Chinese or Japanese, but I have the tattoo. I got a tattoo that was supposed to mean Phyllis. A friend who majored in Mandarin says it means small cake. Not Chinese or Japanese, but relatable. Korean. Worked with a guy in Korea as an ESL teacher. He had the words Greek letter delta Greek letter omega A in poorly written handwriting or American person tatted on his butt cheek, and showed me one day the only tattoo he had. Lol. A work colleague, now long-term friend, had Pompui tattooed on his shoulder. He had been to Thailand and the locals nicknamed him Pompui and said it meant happy fat man. He was fat. He was happy. Lovely man. He did not know how to spell it, or even say it correctly. But 20 years later, he still loves that tattoo. Japanese speaker here. Some guy had one that said DCK in Japanese on his neck. I laughed so hard in the train and no one knew why. Watermelon. White guy on my college basketball team had a Japanese tat down his arm. Asked what it said. He said my name. I said cool. And he said, no, literally. It says my name, not my actual name. I was like, oh shit man. That's horrible. Double quote. And he was like, no. It was intentional. I was drunk and thought it'd be hilarious and or a good way to pick up Japanese chicks who'd feel sorry for me. Double quote. I came away thinking the guy was a huge idiot. It was on a shirt but it said trash fire in Japanese. And I now want that shirt. Not a tattoo. But my uncle, Chinese, married into the family, got me a bag for Christmas a few years ago with kanji on it. It's a very cool bag. It's lead. But I didn't want to be that fool who walked around with a weeb bag and didn't even know what it meant. I asked my uncle. He apparently didn't know. He wasn't even sure if it was Japanese, Chinese, or Korean, which I found interesting considering I knew he spoke Mandarin and he grew up in an ESL household. So I tried to Google it and enlisted my dad in talking to his army friends to figure it out. I finally found out by searching for the bag itself online rather than just the text on it. It turns out the text translates to the worst. It's meant to be a joke to make fun of people who get kanji tattoos without knowing what they mean. Once I found out what my bag said, I loved it even more and confidently wore it out since I could safely explain the joke to people. Found out this past Christmas that my uncle picked it out because he thought it was some anime Naruto thing. Thanks, Uncle Ed. Edit. Change my phrasing to be a little more conscientious that culture isn't genetic. Essentially. I knew a guy who had a full-on Yakuza